Chapter 5. A Battle. The King Proves His War Skill. Yurkun was the first to arrive, all clad in martial finery, accompanied by two massive guards, each holding one of the prince's ornate war banners. "My Emperor!" Yurkun's shout was proud and disdainful. "Would you let me command the warriors? It will relieve you of that care when, doubtless, you have many other concerns with which to occupy your time." Elric replied impatiently, "You are most thoughtful, Prince Yurkun, but fear not for me. I shall command the armies and the navies of Melniboné, for that is the duty of the Emperor." Yurkun glowered and stepped to one side as Divim Tavar, Lord of the Dragon Caves, entered. He had no guard whatsoever with him, and it seemed he had dressed hastily. He carried his helmet under his arm. "My Emperor, I bring news of the dragons." "I thank you, Divim Tavar, but wait until all my commanders are assembled and impart that news to them too." Divim Tavar bowed and went to stand on the opposite side of the hall to that on which Prince Yurkun stood. Gradually the warriors arrived until a score of great captains waited at the foot of the steps which led to the ruby throne where Elric sat. Elric himself still wore the clothes in which he had gone riding that morning. He had not had time to change, and had until a little while before been consulting maps of the maze, maps which only he could read and which, at normal times, were hidden by magical means from any who might attempt to find them. "Southlanders would steal Imrir's wealth and slay us all," Elric began. "They believe they have found a way through our sea maze. A fleet of 100 warships sails on Melniboné even now. Tomorrow it will wait below the horizon until dusk. Then it will sail to the maze and enter. By midnight it expects to reach the harbor and to have taken the dreaming city before dawn. Is that possible, I wonder?" "No!" Many spoke the single word. "No." Elric smiled. "But how shall we best enjoy this little war they offer us?" Yurkun, as ever, was first to shout. "Let us go to meet them now, with dragons and with battle barges. Let us pursue them in their own land and take their war to them. Let us attack their nations and burn their cities. Let us conquer them and thus ensure our own security." Divim Tavar spoke up again. "No dragons," he said. "What?" Yurkun whirled. "What?" "No dragons, Prince. They will not be awakened. The dragons sleep in their caverns, exhausted by their last engagement on your behalf." "Mine?" "You would use them in our conflict with the Vilmirian pirates. I told you that I would prefer to save them for a larger engagement, but you flew them against the pirates and you burned their little boats, and now the dragons sleep." Yurkun glowered. He looked up at Elric. "I did not expect—" Elric raised his hand. "We need not use our dragons until such a time as we really need them. This attack from the Southlander fleet is nothing, but we will conserve our strength if we bide our time. Let them think we are unready. Let them enter the maze. Once the whole 100 are through, we close in, blocking off all routes in or out of the maze. Trapped, they will be crushed by us." Yurkun looked pettishly at his feet, evidently wishing he could think of some flaw in the plan. Tall, Old Admiral Magum Colum, in his sea-green armor, stepped forward and bowed. "The golden battle barges of Imrir are ready to defend their city, my liege. It will take time, however, to maneuver them into position. It is doubtful if all will fit into the maze at once." "Then sail some of them out now and hide them around the coast so that they can wait for any survivors that may escape our attack," Elric instructed him. "A useful plan, my liege." Magum Colum bowed and sank back into the crowd of his peers. The debate continued for some time, and then they were ready and about to leave. But then Prince Yurkun bellowed once more. "I repeat my offer to the Emperor. His person is too valuable to risk in battle. My person, it is worthless. Let me command the warriors of both land and sea, while the Emperor may remain at the palace, untroubled by the battle, confident that it will be won and the Southlanders trounced. Perhaps there is a book he wishes to finish?" Elric smiled. "Again I thank you for your concern, Prince Yurkun, but an emperor must exercise his body as well as his mind. I will command the warriors tomorrow." When Elric arrived back at his apartments, it was to discover that Tanglebones had already laid out his heavy, black war gear. Here was the armor which had served 100 Melnibonéan emperors, an armor which was forged by sorcery to give it a strength unequaled on the realm of earth, which could, so rumor went, even withstand the bite of the mythical rune blades, Stormbringer and Mournblade, which had been wielded by the wickedest of Melniboné's many wicked rulers before being seized by the lords of the higher worlds, and hidden forever in a realm where even those lords might rarely venture. The face of the tangled man was full of joy as he touched each piece of armor, each finely balanced weapon, with his long, gnarled fingers. His seamed face looked up to regard Elric's care-ravaged features. "Oh, my lord, oh, my king, so you will know the joy of the fight! Soon you will know the joy of the fight!" "Aye, Tanglebones, and let us hope it will be with a joy. I taught you all the skills, the art of the sword and the poniard, the art of the bow, the art of the spear, both mounted and on foot. And you learned well, for they all say you are weak, save one. There's no better swordsman in Melniboné." "Prince Yirkun could be better than me," Elric said reflectively. "Could he not?" I said save one, my lord." And Yirkun is that one. Well, one day perhaps we'll be able to test the matter. I'll bathe before I don all that metal." "Best make speed, master. From what I hear, there is much to do." "And I'll sleep after I've bathed." Elric smiled at his old friend's consternation. "It will be better thus, for I cannot personally direct the barges into position. I am needed to command the fray, and that I will do better when I've rested."
"If you think it good, Lord King, then it is good."
"And you are astonished. You are too eager, Tanglebones, to get me into all that stuff and see me strut about in it as if I were Arioch himself." Tanglebones' hand flew to his mouth, as if he had spoken the words, not his master, and he was trying to block them. His eyes widened. Elric laughed. "You think I speak bold heresies, eh? Well, I've spoken worse without any ill befalling me. On Melniboné, Tanglebones, the emperors control the demons, not the reverse."
"So you say, my liege?"
"It is the truth." Elric swept from the room, calling for his slaves. The war fever filled him, and he was jubilant. Now he was in all his black gear, the massive breastplate, the padded jerkin, the long greaves, the mail gauntlets. At his side was a 5-foot broadsword which, it was said, had belonged to a human hero called Obek. Resting on the deck against the golden rail of the bridge was the great round warboard, his shield, bearing the sign of the swooping dragon, and a helm was on his head, a black helm, with a dragon's head craning over the peak, and dragon's wings flaring backward above it, and a dragon's tail curling down the back. All the helm was black, but within the helm there was a white shadow from which glared 2 crimson orbs, and from the sides of the helm strayed wisps of milk-white hair, almost like smoke escaping from a burning building. And, as the helm turned in what little light came from the lantern hanging at the base of the mainmast, the white shadow sharpened to reveal features. Fine, handsome features. A straight nose, curved lips, upslanting eyes. The face of Emperor Elric of Melniboné peered into the gloom of the maze as he listened for the first sounds of the sea raiders' approach. He stood on the high bridge of the great golden battle barge which, like all its kind, resembled a floating ziggurat equipped with masts and sails and oars and catapults. The ship was called the Son of the Piare, and it was the flagship of the fleet. The Grand Admiral Magum Colum stood beside Elric. Like Divim Tavar, the Admiral was one of Elric's few close friends. He had known Elric all his life and had encouraged him to learn all he could concerning the running of fighting ships and fighting fleets. Privately, Magum Colum might fear that Elric was too scholarly and introspective to rule Melniboné, but he accepted Elric's right to rule and was made angry and impatient by the talk of the likes of Yirkun. Prince Yirkun was also aboard the flagship, though at this moment he was below, inspecting the war engines. The Son of the Piare lay at anchor in a huge grotto, one of hundreds built into the walls of the maze when the maze itself was built, and designed for just this purpose. to hide a battle barge. There was just enough height for the masts and enough width for the oars to move freely. Each of the golden battle barges was equipped with banks of oars, each bank containing between 20 and 30 oars on either side. The banks were 4, 5, or 6 decks high and, as in the case of the Son of the Piare, might have 3 independent steering systems, fore and aft. Being armored all in gold, the ships were virtually indestructible, and, for all their massive size, they could move swiftly and maneuver delicately when occasion demanded. It was not the first time they had waited for their enemies in these grottos. It would not be the last, though when next they waited it would be in greatly different circumstances. The battle barges of Melniboné were rarely seen on the open seas these days, but once they had sailed the oceans of the world like fearsome floating mountains of gold, and they had brought terror whenever they were sighted. The fleet had been larger then, comprising hundreds of craft. Now there were less than 40 ships, but 40 would suffice. Now, in damp darkness, they awaited their enemies. Listening to the hollow slap of the water against the sides of the ship, Elric wished that he had been able to conceive a better plan than this. He was sure that this one would work, but he regretted the waste of lives, both Melnibonéan and barbarian. It would have been better if some way could have been devised of frightening the barbarians away, rather than trapping them in the sea maze. The Southlander fleet was not the first to have been attracted by Imrir's fabulous wealth. The Southlander crews were not the first to entertain the belief that the Melnibonéans, because they never now ventured far from the dreaming city, had become decadent and unable to defend their treasures, and so the Southlanders must be destroyed in order to make the lesson clear. Melniboné was strong. She was strong enough, in Yurkun's view, to resume her former dominance of the world. Strong in sorcery, if not in soldiery. Hist!
Hist!
Admiral Magum Colin craned forward.
Was that the sound of an oar?
Elric nodded. I think so. Now they heard regular splashes, as rows of oars dipping in and out of the water, and they heard the creak of timbers. The Southlanders were coming. The Son of the Piare was the ship nearest to the entrance, and it would be the first to move out, but only when the last of the Southlanders' ships had passed them. Admiral Magum Colin bent and extinguished the lantern. Then, quickly, quietly, he descended to inform his crew of the raiders' coming. Not long before, Yurkun had used his sorcery to summon a peculiar mist, which hid the golden barges from view, but through which those on the Melnibonéan ships could peer. Now Elric saw torches burning in the channel ahead, as carefully the reavers negotiated the maze. Within the space of a few minutes, 10 of the galleys had passed the grotto. Admiral Magum Colin rejoined Elric on the bridge, and now Prince Yurkun was with him. Yurkun, too, wore a dragon helm, though less magnificent than Elric's, for Elric was chief of the few surviving dragon princes of Melniboné. Yurkun was grinning through the gloom, and his eyes gleamed in anticipation of the bloodletting to come. Elric wished that Prince Yurkun had chosen another ship than this, but it was Yurkun's right to be aboard the flagship, and he could not deny it. Now half the 100 vessels had gone past. Yurkun's armor creaked as, impatiently, he waited, pacing the bridge, his gauntleted hand on the hilt of his broadsword.
Soon,
he kept saying to himself.
Soon.
And then their anchor was groaning upwards, and their oars were plunging into the water as the last Southland ship went by, and they shot from the grotto into the channel, ramming the enemy galley amidships and smashing it in two. A great yell went up from the barbarian crew. Men were flung in all directions. Torches danced erratically on the remains of the deck as men tried to save themselves from slipping into the dark, chill waters of the channel. A few brave spears rattled against the sides of the Melnibonéan flag galley as it began to turn amongst the debris it had created. But Imririan archers returned the shots, and the few survivors went down. The sound of this swift conflict was the signal to the other battle barges. In perfect order they came from both sides of the high rock walls, and it must have seemed to the astonished barbarians that the great golden ships had actually emerged from solid stone. Ghost ships filled with demons who rained spears, arrows, and brands upon them. Now the whole of the twisting channel was confusion, and a medley of war shouts echoed and boomed, and the clash of steel upon steel was like the savage hissing of some monstrous snake. And the raiding fleet itself resembled a snake which had broken into 100 pieces by the tall, implacable golden ships of Melniboné. These ships seemed almost serene as they moved against their enemies, their grappling irons flashing out to catch wooden decks and rails, and draw the galleys nearer so that they might be destroyed. But the Southlanders were brave, and they kept their heads after their initial astonishment. 3 of their galleys headed directly for the Son of the Piare, recognizing it as the flagship. Fire arrows sailed high and dropped down onto the decks, which were wooden and not protected by the golden armor, starting fires wherever they fell, or else bringing blazing death to the men they struck. Elric raised his shield above his head, and 2 arrows struck it, bouncing, still flaring, to a lower deck. He leapt over the rail, following the arrows, jumping down to the widest and most exposed deck where his warriors were grouping, ready to deal with the attacking galleys. Catapults thudded, and balls of blue fire swished through the blackness, narrowly missing all 3 galleys. Another volley followed, and one mass of flame struck the far galley's mast and then burst upon the deck, scattering huge flames wherever it touched. Grapple snaked out and seized the first galley, dragging it close, and Elric was among the first to leap down onto the deck, rushing forward to where he saw the Southland captain, dressed all in crude, checkered armor, a checkered surcoat over that, a big sword in both his huge hands, bellowing at his men to resist the Melnibonean dogs. As Elric approached the bridge, 3 barbarians armed with curved swords and small, oblong shields ran at him. Their faces were full of fear, but there was determination there as well, as if they knew they must die but planned to wreak as much destruction as they could before their souls were taken. Shifting his warboard onto his arm, Elric took his own broadsword in both hands and charged the sailors, knocking one off his feet with the lip of the shield and smashing the collarbone of another. The remaining barbarian skipped aside and thrust his curved sword at Elric's face. Elric barely escaped the thrust, and the sharp edge of the sword grazed his cheek, bringing out a drop or 2 of blood. Elric swung the broadsword like a scythe, and it bit deep into the barbarian's waist, almost cutting him in 2. He struggled for a moment, unable to believe that he was dead, but then, as Elric yanked the sword free, he closed his eyes and dropped. The man who had struck by Elric's shield was staggering to his feet as Elric whirled, saw him, and smashed the broadsword into his skull. Now the way was clear to the bridge. Elric began to climb the ladder, noting that the captain had seen him and was waiting for him at the top. Elric raised his shield to take the captain's first blow. Through all the noise, he thought he heard the man shouting at him, "Die, you white-faced demon! Die, you have no place in this earth any longer!" Elric was almost diverted from defending himself by these words. They rang true to him. Perhaps he really had no place on the earth. Perhaps that was why Melniboné was slowly collapsing, why fewer children were born every year, why the dragons themselves were no longer breeding. He let the captain strike another blow at the shield, then he reached under it and swung at the man's legs. But the captain had anticipated the move and jumped backwards. This, however, gave Elric time to run up the few remaining steps and stand on the deck, facing the captain. The man's face was almost as pale as Elric's. He was sweating and he was panting, and his eyes had misery in them as well as a wild fear. "You should leave us alone," Elric heard himself saying. "We offer you no harm, barbarian. When did Melniboné last sail against the young kingdoms?" "You offer us harm by your very presence, whiteface. There is your sorcery, there are your customs, and there is your arrogance." "Is that why you came here? Was your attack motivated by disgust for us? Or would you help yourselves to our wealth? Admit it, Captain. Greed brought you to Melniboné."
At least greed is an honest quality, an understandable one. But you creatures are not human. Worse, you are not gods, though you behave as if you were. Your day is over, and you must be wiped out, your city destroyed, your sorceries forgotten.
Elric nodded. Perhaps you are right, Captain.
I am right. Our holy men say so. Our seers predict your downfall. The Chaos Lords whom you serve will themselves bring about that downfall.
The Chaos Lords no longer have any interest in the affairs of Melniboné. They took away their power nearly 1,000 years since. Elric watched the captain carefully, judging the distance between them. Perhaps that is why our power waned. Or perhaps we merely became tired of power.
Be that as it may,
the captain said, wiping his sweating brow.
Your time is over. You must be destroyed once and for all.
And then he groaned, for Elric's broadsword had come under his checkered breastplate and gone up through his stomach and into his lungs. One knee bent, one leg stretched beneath him. Elric began to withdraw the long sword, looking up into the barbarian's face, which had now assumed an expression of reconciliation.
That was unfair, white face. We had barely begun to talk and you cut the conversation short. You are most skillful. May you writhe forever in the higher hell. Farewell.
Elric hardly knew why, and after the captain had fallen face down on the deck. He hacked twice at the neck until the head rolled off the body, rolled to the side of the bridge, and was then kicked over the side so that it sank into the cold, deep water. And then Yurkun came up behind Elric, and he was still grinning.
You fought fiercely and well, my lord Emperor. That dead man was right.
Right. Elric glared at his cousin. Right.
Aye, it is assessment of your prowess.
And, chuckling, Yurkun went to supervise his men who were finishing off the few remaining raiders. Elric did not know why he had refused to hate Yurkun before, but now he did hate Yurkun. At that moment he would gladly have slain him. It was as if Yurkun had looked deeply into Elric's soul and expressed contempt for what he had seen there. Suddenly Elric was overwhelmed by an angry misery, and he wished with all his heart that he was not a Melnibonéan, that he was not an emperor, and that Yurkun had never been born.